Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Dear devotees, as you know, Sydney Carlingford Amauthara Buddhist Center is conducting in this rain retreat of Dhamma sermon, series of Dhamma sermon in this rain retreat. Today sermon is mainly about wisdom and compassion, and especially I would like to thank Mr. Kosala Rajapaksha and Mrs. Niru Shah Henagarachi and their family, and Mr. Adisha Dodamwala and Mrs. Salani Dodamwala and their family for sponsored today by Dhamma sermon. I'm happy to invite Venerable Ajahn Sujato Thero to continue his valuable Dhamma sermon from now onward. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, so that seems to be good. Can everybody hear me now? I can't see anybody and I can't get any feedback on that, so I'm just going to have to assume that people can hear me. So one thing, can I just ask if people can turn their video streams on, then I appreciate. Oh, you can see. Thank you so much. That's good. So if people can turn, and Sinsin, thank you. So if people can turn their video streams on, that helps me because then I can see you. Hey, Julian, and it makes me happy to see you, and you can see each other, but also it gives me a little bit of feedback as to the talk. Like I can see if, when people are falling asleep and all of this kind of thing. So, you know, so if you are falling asleep, then I know to make sure that I speak nice and quietly so I don't wake you up during the talk. Anyway, so like I said, I do apologize for having to put the talk back today, half an hour. And I've just had another session with a group in Brisbane. So there's some old friends of mine, John Kelly and John and Lynn Kelly and his group up there. And then later tonight, I'll be doing another session with Europe and US. So it's kind of crazy. This is my life is not normally like this. But anyway, okay. So I can see Kosala is getting the kids ready to listen to the Dhamma talk. That's good. How's it going, kids? Very good. Okay. So, so today's talk is talking about the two wings of wisdom and compassion. And it's a talk that builds on from the talk I gave yesterday, which was about ethics and giving rise to happiness through our ethics and our moral conduct. And so I'm going to pick that up and go forward into looking more at meditation and what the foundations are of meditation. Oh, I should just ask before we continue too far, do we have a cutoff time for this evening? Do we have like should we finish up by 9 or 9:30, or what's the time for that? No one. If somebody can maybe give me put that over the chat, the time, that would be good. Hey Piotr, how's it going? Are you coming in from Poland? Really? Okay, excellent. Are you joining in with later this evening as well? Yeah, we're having an event later this evening with Samita. So yeah, Piotr is one of the helped organize my retreats in Poland. So okay. Wisdom and compassion, right? Okay. So just to recap briefly some of the things that I talked about yesterday, I talked about how morality and our conduct was something that we practice in part of Buddhism. Obviously, we practice it in order to do what is good and to reduce the harm in the world, but we also are doing it to find peace inside ourselves. And I tried to sort of get to this idea that why it does that. Why is it that being good makes us happy? Why is there that connection? Well, it's because being good, it like brings us into accord with nature. It makes us live our lives in a way that fits in with how the world is. And so it becomes natural and it becomes easy to be happy. So happiness shouldn't be something that's hard. Happiness shouldn't be something that that we need to work at or that we need special conditions for. Happiness should be normal. It should be normal to be happy. I mean, think about it. You know, look at our lives these days. You know, we have so many things. You know, we have cars and houses and all of these kinds of things that we got ostensibly to make us happy. And we're capable of creating the conditions for happiness more than any other creature in the history of our planet. It should be easy. It should be our heritage. So the Dhamma allows us to live our life in a way that we can be happy and that we can gradually, step by step, build that happiness a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Now, moral conduct is one thing, not doing bad things, not hurting anybody, not stealing anybody, not betraying anybody, not misleading anybody. Those things are all good. And they lead to a sense of happiness within ourselves. But Buddhism also goes a lot further than that, because Buddhism also gives us a way of being able to look into our own minds and to understand the happiness and the sadness that we're experiencing in our own heart. This is something which is very, very rare to find in the world. You just think about it. Think about how happiness is sold to us. People put on advertisements. Someone's happy. Buy this product and you'll be happy. That's how ads work. And they think they can fool us. They think they can fool us into thinking that if we buy this product, we're going to be happy. Are we going to be fooled? Are we really that stupid that we're going to buy that? No, it's just advertising. You don't pay it too much attention. It's not that important. So it wants to kind of make this link and this condition for happiness, that you always have to have something more, you always have to have something extra. But you don't actually. Happiness doesn't come from those things. Happiness comes from very simple things. Happiness comes from being kind to a friend. Happiness comes from unexpectedly looking up and seeing a rainbow. Happiness comes from seeing the people around you being happy. Happiness isn't something that we have to work hard for. And so when we come to meditate, and when we come to look in Buddhism, one of the things that we learn is that happiness and sadness are things that we experience inside ourselves. Happiness and sadness are things that we experience inside ourselves. Now, when we do that, and when we experience that through meditation, it comes as, at first it comes as a bit of a shock, and it's kind of confusing. One of the things that people often find when they start to meditate, right? So the first time you sit to meditate, most people will come, they'll sit and meditate. And of course, we've all heard meditation makes you peaceful. Meditation makes you happy. And you come and you sit to meditate, close your eyes, and yeah, no, it's not like that. Where is that peace? Where's that happiness? They sold it to me. They told me that this would make me peaceful and make me happy. Where is it? Right. And it seems so elusive. And people are like, what's wrong with me? I can't meditate. Why is it that all I want to do is be peaceful? And yet I can't stop my mind from just running around all over the place. It's weird, isn't it? It's weird. All we want in life is to be happy. And yet, it seems so elusive, so hard. Now, come back to that experience, and I'm sure we've all had that experience when you're meditating, is you sit down to meditate, you think you're going to be happy, but then what happens? Mind's all over the place, and we think that something's gone wrong. This is our first mistake. First mistake is not that the mind is chaotic and messy. First mistake is that we think that there's something wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just nature. It's just how your mind is, that's all. And that state of chaos, that state of everything being all over the place, that state of stress and anxiety and all of those things, that's nature. Nature is violent. Nature is hard. Nature is always full of conflict, and it's always full of imperfection. And so when you meditate, the thing that matters is not the fact that your mind is messy, because your mind has always been messy. The thing that matters is that you realize it. You notice it. That's what's happened. And so people think, oh, my mind should be peaceful. No, no, no. You're realizing that it isn't peaceful. That's the foundation of wisdom. That's where wisdom begins from. So if we understand that our mind is messy, then we're ready to take the first step towards a mind of peace. Now, one of the first things that we want to do when we do that is to try to say, well, look, my mind has all these problems. How do I fix them? And so we get out our screwdrivers and our spanners and our hammers, and we start bashing away at our mind to try to make it better. And, there's a lot of times when in Buddhism, we find that, the meditation is referred to as like a toolkit, right? These kinds of metaphors, that there's like this kind of very kind of handyman kind of approach to meditation. And of course, look, that's not entirely wrong, right? And that's just a metaphor. It's just one way of looking at it. But being a meditator it's a lot less like being an engineer and a lot more like being a gardener. And so a gardener might want to intervene sometimes, right? They might clip a bush here, they might pull out a weed there, they might put a bit of fertilizer on there. But they're not in there trying to determine and shape every moment that's happening. They want to nudge things in the right direction. Right? An engineer has to fix exactly everything there. Gardener sort of shapes things, and for a gardener to watch how the different plants flourish in different parts of the garden is just as important as their own ideas. So they come in with an idea, I want to put whatever hydrangeas on that side of the garden, but then if the sun's falling the wrong way, then that's not going to work. So they have to listen to what's actually going on. So this is the first thing about gardening that is like meditation, right? The fact that you intervene only in limited cases in a very gentle way. That's one thing. The second thing where gardening is like meditation is that you don't just do it for the outcome. Sure, you want to grow some nice flowers. Maybe you want to grow some zucchini, right? But you actually do it because you enjoy it, because it's nice to spend some time in the sun, because it's nice to watch the plants and to look at the bees buzzing around. And it's nice to get your fingers in the dirt from time to time. And it's just enjoyable to do that. So meditation also is like that. So yes, in a way, in meditation, just as the gardener would have an idea that they want these flowers to blossom, we also have an idea that we want to find a state of peace, whether it's a state of peace in meditation like the jhanas, or whether it's a state of enlightenment. But we have this idea in our mind that we want to achieve that state. But that's not like the foremost thing in our mind when we're meditating. We're not meditating for that. We're just meditating because it's nice to meditate. Because it's just nice to be here. It's nice to spend some time with yourself. And that second part that I've just been talking about, this is where the compassion is coming in. So remember I talked about when you first come to meditate, the first thing you do is you realize, oh, my mind is messy. So this is the wisdom side. And then the second side that comes in is the compassion. It's the love. Again, just like a gardener, right? So a gardener has to understand these plants belong here, those plants don't belong there, these bugs are going to eat the plants, these bugs are going to help to fertilize them, and so on. So they understand this, and this is your wisdom that understands those things. But it's your compassion and your love that makes you stay there and makes you want to spend time there, and that allows you to like enjoy the wonder of those things that are unfolding even without you, to be able to just watch it and to enjoy the unfolding of those things. So these two sides of meditation that we call wisdom and compassion, sometimes when we're talking, now these are, of course, wisdom and compassion are very general qualities. And specifically in meditation, we talk about, the Pali words we talk about are vipassana and samatha. Right? So vipassana is the wisdom side of things, usually translated as insight. I prefer the word discernment for vipassana. And the word samatha meaning calm or peacefulness. And so these two meditations correspond to those kind of two different aspects of our mind. So the aspect of our mind which is based on wisdom, which comes from like intelligence, inquiry, critical thinking, and so on. And then the samatha side, which comes from this, like the emotional side of meditation. And it comes from acceptance, and it comes from love, and it comes from compassion, and it comes from joy and faith and all of those kinds of things. So meditation is about a holistic development where we develop both of those kinds of things. And it's really, really important to remember this. And, one of the things that I'm, quite conscious in my life, as a, scholar, as someone who does, quite a lot of analytical work with the suttas and things like that, that for me, my own personality, it's quite natural and quite easy for me to approach things from an intellectual perspective. I'm quite an intelligent person, and I enjoy using my mind and my intellect and a kind of rational, analytical tendency. And that's just who I am. Right? But I don't fool myself to think that that's what Dhamma is. I don't want to sort of that's a faculty that I can exercise in my understanding and my approach to Dhamma, but it's not like the be all and end all of things. Not everybody is like that. People have different strengths. And I certainly wouldn't want to live in a world where everybody was a kind of an analytical, text critical scholar. That would be boring. And just imagine poor old Gillian, the amount of moderating that she'd have to do on the sort of central forum. That would be terrible, right? So we all have those different strengths, right? And some people approach Dhamma from a very emotional point of view. And so for myself, when I see that, right, if I see somebody coming to Dhamma from a very devotional point of view, coming to the temple and very like bowing and offering flowers to the temple, and that kind of simple devotion that you see, that so touching to see throughout Buddhist countries, to me, I feel kind of jealous. I feel a little bit jealous of those people. I'm like, oh, it would be really nice to just have that simple faith and that simple devotion. I'm not really jealous of them because I'm actually quite like being me. So, but you know, there is that there is that feeling about it to say, oh yeah, there's actually something really beautiful in that, and to be able to respect that we have those different kinds of personalities. And so the fact that people have these different kinds of personalities is why the Buddha taught meditation in these different kinds of ways. So we have certain kinds of meditations that will exercise the intellectual and critical faculties of the mind, and other kinds of meditation that might more stimulate the emotional responses. Right? So on the one side, you have more the analytical meditations, meditation on the five khandhas, meditation on dependent origination and so on. And on the other side, we have more like the metta meditation, buddhanusati, and so on. And so, you know, we shouldn't think of these kinds of meditations as being like completely separate or completely distinct. Actually, they're all kind of, you know, they're all happening in the same mind. And a mind isn't like separated. Everything goes together. So these different dimensions of meditation, samatha and vipassana, are different ways of working with your mind. And so partly it's a matter of personality that you should like recognize what is more suitable or more useful for you to do. But there's also a question of balance there as well, that if somebody has a more devotional or love-based approach to meditation, then it's actually good for them to spend some time doing a more analytical practice as well. And similarly, with somebody whose mind inclines more to do an analytical practice, then they should also balance that out by doing some metta and some other things. So these things should never be separated. And when we see that that these things are divided and separated, then that's a sign that something is broken down. The separation is a problem. And the opposition and division between these things reflects a breakdown in the psyche. Right? It's an external reflection of an inner breakdown between the intellectual and the emotional faculties in the mind. And that's quite unhealthy, actually. So when we're meditating, we need to make sure that these things don't happen. We need to make sure that we develop our meditation in a balanced and a healthy way, and that wisdom and compassion are actually always there, and that they're always informing and supporting our meditation to grow and to deepen. Now that happens through any number of ways, right? There's not just one way in which it happens, and there's not like a formula by which you can sort of make wisdom happen. This is one reason why I don't like the word insight as a translation for vipassana. Actually, nothing wrong with insight, okay? But the problem is that the word insight in English usually means like a moment of realization into something, or like a special kind of knowledge or something into something. Oh, I had an insight into how that worked, right? Or someone has this, so it's like a kind of special or intuitive knowledge. Which is it's not different from vipassana, but it's not really what vipassana means. So the word vipassana is used in the suttas in the sense of clear seeing or discernment of something. And it's used in some interesting contexts. One of the contexts, like, so as a scholar, coming from a scholarly point of view, I like to look at the real world usages of words, and then we sort of try to draw from them to the Dhamma usage. And say, why were they using these words in the Dhamma? So in the real world usage of vipassana, we find some interesting examples. So in the Mahapadana Sutta, in the Digha Nikaya, the Buddha talks about why Vipassi, the Bodhisattva, was called Vipassi, and it was given that for two reasons. One was because he was capable of discerning things that were very far away. Right? When he was a boy, he could look out and he could discern what was very far away. So this idea of clear seeing, you can see what's off in the distance. Right? So you can see in that kind of case, like insight isn't necessarily the right word for that. right? It actually means clear seeing or discernment, right? What's that off in the distance? So that's one meaning of vipassana. Another meaning of vipassana is that, and this is a very interesting example, because he was in his father's court. His father was the king, according to the story of Vipassi, the Bodhisattva. Then when he was just a boy, his father would put him on his knee, and he would listen to the cases that were being brought towards the king, and then he would draw out a conclusion using an appropriate and rational method, and be able to determine the answer to those court cases. And that is also why he's called Vipassi. So that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So vipassana in that kind of sense means being able to actually infer what is the consequences of something, to understand what's the reason for it, and to be able to understand the relationship between things. So again, insight isn't necessarily the right word for that process. Okay, so so far I'm talking about this kind of wisdom side of things, okay? And to develop our wisdom and to grow our wisdom, we, as with everything in Buddhism, we take a step-by-step approach. One of the most basic forms of growing our wisdom is to get our facts right. And I seem to spend an inordinate amount of my time sort of doing fact-checking. I don't know if anybody else finds that, but there's so many ridiculous pseudo-facts around the place these days that you have to sort of check everything and double-check it. It's not that it's impossible to do, but you have to spend a bit of time doing it. Why do we do that? You know, and again, as a scholar, and when I'm discussing things with people in the suttas, and I'm always paying attention to these nuances of the actual facts of the things. What does the text actually say, as opposed to what are we reading into it? And I know that this can often seem very pedantic, and it can often seem very nitpicky and very small-minded. But the point is not that necessarily every fact is so important, but it's that if you can't get those small things right, how are you going to get the big things right? Really, if you can't get the small things right, if you can't quote a line from the suttas accurately, if you can't give the reference properly, if you can't take the trouble to spell a Pali word correctly, right? I mean, that doesn't mean all that much, you know, make a mistake or something, it's okay. But if you can't do those things, how can I trust that you understand what the nature of dependent origination is? How can I understand your insight into freedom and all of these things? So we need to make a habit of getting the facts right, looking at those simple things and just making sure step by step that we can get those things right. And so this is something, of course, we learn from a young age, and we learn from when we're kids, that we study, we do tests, and we do answers to those tests, and we try to get the answers right. And getting answers right in tests is not wisdom, but it is something that supports the growth of wisdom. So we shouldn't be stuck in that, and we shouldn't be too pedantic about it, but we also shouldn't neglect it. So first step in growing wisdom is getting our facts right, right? Another step in growing wisdom is to learn how to think and to learn how to reason. And in my view, the ability to reason is one of the rarest and most kind of over-assumed knowledges or faculties in humanity. Everybody thinks that they know how to reason, but very few people actually do. And most people learn how to reason within a narrow context, maybe a professional context. You learn how to do accounting, and you can, you know, manipulate that and do all of those things, and you do it perfectly well. You learn how to do engineering, you learn how to do law. In your field, you know perfectly well how to reason and how to discuss with other people and use the language and so on and so forth. And people assume that because they can do that, that therefore they can reason in other contexts. And very often they can't. And I think that this is actually a majorly underdiagnosed problem, that people just don't know how rationality works. And I first kind of was alerted to this many years ago when I was in Thailand. And I read an article about a professor who was teaching at the college there in Thailand. Was a Western professor. And he found this kind of disconnect, this kind of weird inability to communicate with his students that he didn't really understand. And it only after many years of trying to teach and trying to get over this was that he realized that none of these students, and these were university students, none of these students actually knew how to use rational thought. And they'd come through their education system, basically learning things by rote and regurgitating answers in tests. And none of them knew the difference between a logical argument and one that wasn't logical. And if you taught them a particular mathematical process, they could follow that process fine, but they didn't actually know how to use reason. And so once he learned that, then he started teaching them. He'd begin his course by teaching them Socratic method. So Socratic method is a way of having a conversation where when somebody says something, then you can draw out an implication of that, and you can gradually work together to go step by step to reach a new understanding. And it's a kind of method that Socrates used all the time. We also find it used commonly in the suttas. And so this approach he used as a pedagogical tool to help to teach rationality to his students. And what he found was that once you taught it to them, then they got it right away. And you just had to give them a few classes, teach them this method, and then they were fine and they could go on with their course. So it's not as if it's impossible to do, but a lot of people just don't learn how to do it. Because instead of when we're learning and we're doing education, we're not really paying attention to learn in order to understand. We pay attention to learn in order to make the teachers happy so that we can get a passing grade and pass our exams. So I always remember the best teacher that I always had. And so for Kosala's kids, I hope you take note of this. The best teacher that I ever had was the one who at the start of the class said, if you don't like the marks I give you, then just come and tell me and I'll give you whatever mark you want for the test. And once he said that, it was fantastic because immediately took all of the tension out of it, right? We weren't doing it in order to get marks, right? But getting marks wasn't the point of it. The mark was there in order for us to reflect about how good a job we were doing at it. And the mark was there as something to help us, not as something to hurt us. And there were a few cases, not many, but a few cases during the year when students were unhappy with their mark and they went up and complained to the teacher and asked for a better mark because they thought their work was deserving of a better mark. And if it was a reasonable request, then the teacher would do that. It wasn't like it was abused, but it was something that we all took in good faith. So this is a problem, that we don't know how to reason. And I find this in Buddhism all the time. People constantly come to me with questions, but someone says this, but someone says this, which is true. And it's like I'm there to adjudicate which one is true. Well, figure it out, actually. You figure it out for yourself. Look at what the sutta says. Is that a reasonable interpretation of it? And look at the reasons why somebody says that and try to understand it for yourself. And so this is that second dimension of wisdom. So the first dimension I made was merely fact-checking. Now I'm talking about applying those facts, developing it to reason, understanding cause and effect and the consequence of things. So this is also a part of our development of wisdom. And then finally, another part of development of wisdom is also what we would call more the insight proper, which is where you really see through the reality of things and you come to more of an intuitive grasp of the nature of things, the nature of impermanence, the nature of conditionality and causality. That kind of wisdom builds up from the earlier kinds. It's not something that you get by just rote application of a method. It's something that happens when the wisdom faculty inside you has matured to a sufficient degree. So don't imagine that you can go through life being confused by fake posts on Facebook and unable to tell when an advertisement is lying to you and unable to tell the difference between basic factuality and reality. And don't think that you can get through life like that, show up at a Buddhist meditation retreat and suddenly get insight into the nature of reality. No, it's not going to happen. right? That's delusion. It's delusion that is stopping you from being able to understand basic facts. It's delusion that is stopping you from being able to use basic reasoning. And if you can't address those basic forms of delusion, you're not going to be able to get the more subtle forms of delusion that underlie or that block our perception of reality in Buddhist meditation. So wisdom is that gradual process, and it's something that we start by keeping on coming back to the basics, working on those basics, gradually building up. And then when the time comes, the insight comes and we see the truth. And then when that comes, there is a moment of clarity and a moment of calm. And we see, that's how things are. Now, I've been talking about that development of wisdom, and the development of the other side of meditation, the compassion side, also is similar, in the sense that it's begun by building step by step, starting from the simple things, and starting from what I was talking about yesterday with keeping precepts, starting from being kind to each other, treating each other with dignity and respect. If you can't do that, and if your mind is full of anger and hate, if your mind is seized by prejudice, by racism, by sexism, by all of these kinds of horrible things, then you're never going to be able to have the depth and of the love and the compassion that will lead you to deep meditation. And so this is why it's really important for us as meditators to look at what are the causes that is breaking down the love that we experience in our heart. Now, it's very easy to look at the world, and you can see all of the people fighting in the world, and you can see all of there's climate change, and there is people protesting on streets, and there is hunger, and there are all of these things happening in the world. And it's very stressful, right? Genuinely, it's very stressful. And don't be afraid of that. Don't try to hide from it. And don't deny it. It's okay. It's okay. I get stressed by it, and somehow life goes on. I'm not quite sure why, but it does. Yeah, we're still here. If I see somebody who isn't stressed by these things, that's when I get a bit worried about them. And if somebody is not worried about climate change, then I think they're probably either enlightened or in denial. And I guess there's probably like very few people in the world who are really enlightened, and probably a lot more who are in denial. So statistically speaking, one of them is more likely than the other. So our path to understanding those emotions, it begins with a sense of self-acceptance. And that's the foundation of love. To be able to accept yourself as you are. To be okay. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay. It's okay to be stressed. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to be hopeless. It's okay to be despairing. It's okay to be depressed. It's okay. Don't worry about it. This is all part of what it means to be human. And it's all part of the spiritual path. And the Buddha used this term sometimes called niramisa domanassa, which literally means a kind of spiritual depression. And spiritual depression is to me, a very evocative term. And so it's a term that comes from that feeling of, here I am lost in samsara and lost in all of these things, and yet somehow I have this longing for something else, this longing for something more. So if we're coming from a place of true compassion and true love, then our first our first step is to accept who we are and accept what we're feeling without trying to hide from it, without trying to push it away, and without trying to make a big deal about it. It's okay. It's okay. And it's okay if we've been a Buddhist for our whole lives, or have been practicing meditation for many years, and we still feel like that. And we might feel, oh, I should be better, but it's okay. Just accept it. Whatever, it's okay. And from there, we can start to very slowly and very gently make some steps towards finding wholeness and finding healing in our own hearts. If we don't accept it, if we skip over that bit, then we're always going to be on the defensive. We're always going to be like hiding off a part of our own mind, and like locking something in a closet, and always going to be kind of nervous when we walk past that closet. What's down there, or maybe like in the basement, you lock the door to the basement and you're like, you don't want to go down there. What is it? And open up that door. It's all right. Have you got a monster in your basement? Have you got a monster under the bed? Maybe. You can see the kids are smiling at that bit, and they've maybe got a little thing or two about monsters under the beds, right? So you got monsters under the beds? It's okay. Monsters under your bed can be your friend too. Yeah, they can be your friend too. You'd be surprised. You ask yourself, why is the monster hiding under the bed? Monster's hiding under the bed because he's afraid, because he's ashamed. Huh? He thinks that you're not going to like him. But if you invite your monsters out from the bed and say, let's go and play a game together, yeah, then it's okay. Then he's not a monster anymore. Then he can be your friend. So we don't want to go through our life locking these things away, locking the monsters away. It's okay. Let them out. And if you feel those things, this is the beginning of love and compassion for ourselves. And this is why when I'm teaching metta meditation, I always teach metta meditation starting with yourself. You need to be able to accept that before we get ready to move on. Now, if we have some degree of metta and acceptance for ourselves, then we can start to appreciate that actually it's not just us. It's not just me who feels anxious. It's not just me who feels stressed. It's not just me who feels joyful. It's not just me who feels faith and devotion, who feels love and laughter. Other people feel those things as well. And so if we can recognize that connection, then we start to let down the barriers that are like the boundaries between oneself and others. Now, this is what the Buddha was talking about when in the Metta Sutta he said that you develop metta just like the love that a mother has for her only child. And that love that a mother has is a love that dissolves the boundaries between the self and other. And in recent years, the psychologists have been coming around to understanding something that mothers always knew, which is that the love that a child feels is grown in the arms of the mother, together, like biologically together with the mother. And they have what they call, neuroscientists call mirror neurons, which is where there's actual like special cells in your brain that the mother and the child will grow together, where they are actually, their brains are actually mirroring each other as they, through that process of just the mother holding the child in the arms and loving her. And that's how we learn to love. So we learn to love through that connection, through that dissolving of the boundaries between oneself and others. So this is where the roots of love and compassion come from. But where delusion steps in is that delusion convinces us that we can only love in that little way. Right? For the child, you can love the mother and then the father, and maybe the whole family. And then later on, they can grow up and maybe friends, and then later maybe fall in love and get married and so on. And so we can extend that circle of love to some degree, a little bit by a little bit. But there's somehow in the mind, there's this thought, or there's this delusion that somehow that powerful transcendent love that we feel, that's something that has some special connection with a particular person. Think of how many love songs are written about love for a particular person, and how few are written about love for everybody. So we're reinforcing this idea that love is somehow limited. And one of the things that the Buddhists came along and said was that actually there's no need for that. We can love all sentient beings. And that means loving regardless of race, regardless of sex, regardless of nationality, regardless of religion, regardless of caste, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of age, regardless of like state of health or ability. None of these things matter all that much. And all of the things that we use to judge others and to compartmentalize and divide people against each other, all of those things are not actually all that important. And that love that we can feel that transcends all of those things, that's what matters. So in meditation, what we can do is we can take this idea of universal love and we can gradually transform it into a realization. And that realization is incredibly profound. It's a completely transformative experience. We don't get there by talking about it or anything like that. We get there by step going the path, walking that path. And it doesn't matter how quickly we walk that path. It doesn't matter about, are we doing this step or are we doing the next step or whatever. All of those things are just details. What matters is that we keep walking. That's all. As long as we keep walking, then we'll get there eventually. And so it's at this point that that aspect of wisdom and that aspect of compassion start to come together. We are transcending our little self through the experience of love. And this is something that, it's not just, again, in meditation, it's not just an idea, it's a realization, it's a state of consciousness where all of these boundaries have been dissolved. In Pali, they use the word sima sambheda, breaking down of the boundaries. And then your wisdom steps in and starts to understand that. If I can break down the boundaries between myself and other, I mean, who am I anyway? What is this thing in here that I think of as myself? And then the analytical and wisdom qualities that we developed earlier, I talked about earlier in the talk, then those things can start to come to the fore. And we can look at it and think, and we can start to ask some very profound questions. For example, that state of love, that's that boundaryless state of transcendental love. What is there? what is actually present in that state. And of course, you'll find that there are certain things that are present in that state. Joy is present, light is present, all these things are present. But what you also start to notice is that what's even more important than that is what is missing, what is absent. What is absent from that state? Yeah. And this is where the wisdom starts to get very profound. Because you begin to realize, oh, actually, it's not that this experience of love hasn't come from actually getting anything. This experience of love is just, it's actually just a natural state of being. It doesn't feel like something that I've had to develop and grow. It's not some artificial state that I've created. It feels like, what it feels like is coming home. It feels like I was kind of here all along, but I just got lost. You ever had that feeling that you know where you should be and how you should be and what you should be, but you kind of just somehow just get lost. And here it is. And you realize that all of these things that you want, you're spending your whole life searching for happiness, and you're searching for all of these things. None of it is about you, actually. None of it is about your happiness. It's actually just all empty. And the most real and true and profound thing that you've ever seen and you've ever realized is also the most non-existent thing that you've ever realized. There's like quite literally nothing to it. It's all just the absence of something. And so this is that profound wisdom of letting go. And one of the signs of a genuine realization or the genuine spiritual practice is that it's not about getting something, it's about noticing that something is not there anymore. And it's even like something is not there anymore, you never even knew that it was there. Something has gone missing that you never knew existed in the first place. You never notice it until it's gone missing. And that's what real letting go is about. And so it's in letting go and in freedom that these two wings of compassion and wisdom take flight. Because the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice is not wisdom, it's not even to be good, it's not to be happy, it's not even to have love. All of these are great things and they're all part of the path of Buddhism, but they're not the goal of Buddhism. The goal of Buddhism is freedom. To be free from suffering. And that freedom is not itself a state of wisdom, it's not itself a state of compassion or a state of morality or any of these things. It's a state of letting go. And so all of these practices are teaching us to let go of our intentions, bad intentions, to let go of our thoughts and bad thoughts especially, and then even good thoughts, to teach us to let go of our attachment to our own views and ideas, to teach us to let go of our laziness and our conceit and all of those things, to let go of all of those things. And then when we manage to finally let go, it's kind of like letting go is kind of crazy really, because it's like all of the things that the Buddha taught about, they're so obvious, and most of us have probably heard them so many times. Yeah, letting go is great. Yes, not self is great. Emptiness, all these things are great. But we never actually do it. And that one moment when you actually do it for the first time, Oh, right. That's what the Buddha was talking about. Ah, yes, actually letting go for once. Yeah, that's something really special. So this is my talk for you this evening on the subject of the wings of wisdom and compassion. So I offer that for your reflection, and I hope that was of some use and some benefit for you. And I do apologize especially for the kids who are here, Kosala's kids. If it was a bit boring for you, I'm sorry about that, but at least I did talk about monsters a little bit, so hopefully that bit was less. But anyway, congratulations on staying with it and staying with the talk. I think that's really nice. So I'm not sure, I think that in these sessions we're not having questions, so I might leave it there, but I think this is probably time for us to wrap up. It's 9 o'clock now in Sydney. And thank you once again to the Amarwatara Buddhist Centre and the Venerables there and the committee who have organised this. It's a great opportunity to meet, and even though we're in the same city, sometimes, you know, we don't even get to see each other. A Venerable from the monastery was saying, like, the last time we actually saw each other was at a mosque last year. So sometimes that's the only time we get to see each other. And for all of the rest of you who Dhamma, dear friends and Dhamma practitioners, I wish you the best. And I hope that you all find happiness, find wisdom and compassion and peace. For those of you in Sydney, that's probably it for tonight. For Piotr, maybe if you're interested, joining the Samhita group later this evening. Anyway, I'm going to be up till 12. We're going to be starting, so that'll be fun. I thought, why not, right? I can do something crazy once in a while. Probably be recording it. Anyway, so thank you so much, everybody, and I wish you all the best. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.